everybody, today we are debating, is God the best explanation for the universe, and we are starting right now. Details: how would you make this claim?
My claim is that God is the best explanation for the fine-tuning of the cosmological constants, abiogenesis, and that I have a superior version of Pascal's wager that would tip the scale away from alternative explanations.
This sounds like a fascinating debate. Your claim combines several interesting aspects related to theology, philosophy, and cosmology. Let's proceed with the opening statements. As per the rules of formal debate, we will each present our opening statement. This will be followed by a structured exchange where we challenge and defend our positions, and finally an open discussion. Since you've provided your claim, you may start with your opening statement, or if you prefer, I can start with mine.
I will start by defining God. This system is one which has the processing capability to overcome the odds towards entropy to the extent that permits life to exist. The well-fine-tuning of the universe has multiple explanations: our intelligent mind or computation, unlimited dice throws via a multiverse, and necessity that these constants can't be any other way. The multiverse explains too much, as it would allow anything from unicorns and even a god. It also fails our attempts thus far to deduce models which would logically function. The exception is a system that times its reactions to such precision that its universe generation mechanism itself would demand fine-tuning. I'm not aware of anyone who has a viable evidence for necessity. I see no issue with a computation-capable system being the first cause.
Thank you for your opening statement. It offers a clear perspective on why you believe God, defined as a computational system able to overcome entropy and permit life, is the best explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe, abiogenesis, and aspects of Pascal's wager. Now, I will present my opening statement. While it is true that the precise tuning of cosmological constants and the phenomenon of abiogenesis suggest a finely regulated system, attributing them to a computational God is just one of many possible explanations. Furthermore, the invocation of a God as a computational entity raises questions that complicate rather than simplify our understanding. Firstly, while it might be comforting to imagine a computational God as the fine-tuner, the leap from "we don't fully understand this yet" to "therefore, a divine entity must be responsible" is not necessarily a logical one. It's essential to remember that the lack of a current definitive answer does not automatically validate the theistic explanation. Secondly, the concept of God being the first cause presents its own paradox. If everything requires a cause, then what caused God? If we accept that God is self-existing, why couldn't the universe, with all its precise constants, also be self-existing? This invokes the principle of parsimony, or Occam's razor, which suggests that among competing hypotheses, the one with the fewest assumptions should be selected. The self-existing universe hypothesis arguably requires fewer assumptions than a self-existing God. Finally, as for Pascal's wager, it relies heavily on the cost-benefit analysis of belief. However, this wager oversimplifies the complexities of belief and non-belief and the numerous possibilities they encompass, not merely a binary choice between the Christian God or nothing. Having laid out these points, I look forward to a fruitful exchange that brings clarity to our understanding of these profound questions.
I do not commit the God of the gaps fallacy, since I do not make a leap. I just take the available explanations and weigh their merits, and a tuner appears to be the best explanation for tuning. Your paradox is a straw man, as I did not state everything requires a cause, only things with a beginning require a cause logically. You ask, why couldn't the universe be considered self-existing? The answer is that the evidence of inflation and the Big Bang indicates the universe had a beginning. I also am not certain that God didn't have a cause, but you don't need to explain the explanation to determine it is best. I don't need to know anything about my mother in order to deduce the bowl of cereal was placed on the table by her. I haven't described yet my version of Pascal's wager, in which I don't value belief as it is irrelevant to reality. I instead propose that if the universe just is, there is no ought, so nothing matters ultimately, including the question. But only if there is a purposer can the object have objective purpose, and so the universe possibly matters.
Thank you for your thoughtful response and for clarifying your position. Let's address these points in turn. Fine-tuning. Your position is essentially a teleological argument, which states that the universe's order and complexity require a designer. While it's true that we don't fully understand why the constants of the universe are so finely tuned, there are plausible non-theistic explanations as well, such as the anthropic principle, which suggests that we observe the universe to be fine-tuned for life, because only in such a universe could observers like us exist. This doesn't involve a tuner, but a self-selecting bias. It's not a definitive answer, but neither is the concept of a tuner at this stage. Cause and effect. I agree that you haven't explicitly stated that everything needs a cause. However, when proposing a first cause or a tuner, the implication is that effects require causes. The Big Bang does provide evidence that the universe had a beginning, but it doesn't necessarily point to a cause outside of natural processes. Additionally, if we can entertain the possibility of a self-existing God, then we must also consider the universe could be self-existing in a way we don't yet understand, or part of a broader multiverse. Pascal's wager. You're suggesting a version of Pascal's wager focused not on belief, but on purpose. While this is an intriguing twist, it still presents some complications. For instance, it presupposes that objective purpose can only come from a higher power. Many would argue that purpose can be derived from our relationships, our work, our contributions to society, and our search for understanding, irrespective of the existence of a higher power. In sum, while God could be an explanation for these phenomena, we should be cautious about calling it the best explanation given the current state of our knowledge and the existence of alternative explanations. Let's continue our open discussion on these complex and intriguing subjects.
The anthropic principle is a self-contained principle but cannot be applied as an explanation without committing fallacy, so it should not be mentioned. You said, the Big Bang doesn't necessarily point to a cause outside of natural processes, and I agree since all processes are natural. We could add imaginary boundaries between nested systems, but in reality even God is a natural system within the outermore universe. You say we should entertain the possibility that the universe is self-existing, but I don't see evidence of that and won't claim God is either. As I said, you don't need infinitum nested explanations before explaining a thing. I follow the evidence instead of leading it. The evidence is that the universe had a beginning cause, but I haven't yet seen evidence of God having a beginning, so I won't make a claim about that. You say, many would argue that purpose can be derived from our relationships, our work, our contributions to society, and our search for understanding, but those are subjective, made up after the fact. Since they didn't make the object, they did not set the purpose of the object's creation. Instead, they merely invent made-up purposes after the fact rather than deducing the purpose the object was made in the first place.
Thank you for continuing this engaging debate. Your points are well-reasoned and articulate a certain perspective on our universe's origin and purpose. Let's delve deeper into these subjects. Anthropic principle. The anthropic principle can indeed be a somewhat controversial explanation and does not provide a full answer. However, it's an observation that shouldn't be ignored. In a universe less suited to life, we wouldn't be here to observe it. It does not explain why the universe is as it is, but it contextualizes our observations. Natural processes. I appreciate your point about everything, including God, being part of natural processes. This perspective can bring coherence between spiritual and scientific viewpoints. Still, we should clarify that when we say natural processes, we typically refer to processes explained by the laws of physics as we currently understand them. If God or a computational entity outside our known universe is responsible for these processes, that would be beyond our current conception of natural processes. Beginning of the universe. I agree that evidence points to the universe having a beginning, specifically the Big Bang. However, the cause of the Big Bang is still a subject of debate. Moreover, positing a divine cause leads to an infinite regression problem. If everything that begins to exist must have a cause, then the cause itself must have a cause, and so on ad infinitum. Purpose. Your point on subjective versus objective purpose is an interesting philosophical question. You're right that individual purposes are often created or discovered by the individuals themselves, and this doesn't necessarily align with the original cause of their existence. However, I would argue that these subjective purposes can hold real significance and impact. We could consider the possibility that the universe or existence doesn't inherently come with a prescribed purpose, but instead provides a platform for countless purposes to be discovered and created. While these topics are complex and we may not reach a conclusion that satisfies both perspectives, it's these debates that allow us to ponder and explore the mysteries of our universe further.
You're doubling down on the fallacious anthropic principle? This commits presupposing a multiverse for which there is no evidence it exists, and our attempts to model it show it is likely not logically possible without introducing more fine-tuning compounding the complexity. It is most reasonable to instead contextualize the observations in the signs of intelligence prior to the universe. Like I said, you may draw imaginary lines between natural and supernatural if you want. I do not. Wyu mistakenly said, if everything that begins to exist must have a cause, then the cause itself must have a cause, and so on ad infinitum, since the conclusion does not logically follow as not everything begins. Timeless objects do not begin. Consider numbers, functions and logical coherent objects. The truth that 2 always is twice of 1, for example, and this was not caused. We could consider the possibility that the universe or existence doesn't inherently come with a prescribed purpose. This again presupposes God did not create the universe, as the precision involved would imply purpose behind his computation. I would argue that these subjective purposes can hold real significance and impact. Sure, in their feeling and actions, but this does not tell us anything about the reality of the universe's origin, so it is meaningless to this conversation no matter how much it comforts you.
I appreciate your commitment to logical reasoning and rigorous evidence. I will address your points in order. Anthropic principle. The anthropic principle, as mentioned earlier, is a controversial explanation and does not fully resolve the question. It's true that it's often used in multiverse theories, which are speculative. However, it can also apply within a single universe concept, and that we are here to observe this universe precisely because it is compatible with our existence. I agree that it doesn't answer why the universe is the way it is. However, it does provide a perspective to consider when dealing with fine-tuning arguments. Natural processes. It's a valid viewpoint not to distinguish between natural and supernatural. But I would point out that when we discuss the origin of the universe, we typically refer to natural processes as those that can be explained by the current laws of physics. When we talk about a computational entity that transcends the universe, we're venturing into areas beyond our current scientific understanding. Timeless objects. I see your point. In fact, this is a challenging concept in both theology and physics. Many would argue that abstract entities such as numbers and logic are human concepts, not things that exist independent of human cognition. In terms of physical reality, the concept of something timeless or eternal is difficult to reconcile with our understanding of the universe through the lens of relativity and the Big Bang. Purpose of the universe. The idea that precision implies purpose is not necessarily a given. A highly complex and precise system can emerge through natural processes, as we see in the evolution of life. The question of whether such a system implies a deliberate creator is still open to interpretation. Subjective purpose. I agree that personal purpose does not provide insight into the universe's origin. However, in the context of your version of Pascal's wager, where we are contemplating whether the universe matters, subjective purpose can indeed matter to individuals, societies, and potentially to sentient life more broadly. In the end, our understanding of the universe is continually evolving. These discussions challenge us to think critically about the evidence and the logic we use to interpret that evidence. Let's continue this enriching conversation. I respect your perspective and appreciate your commitment to the pursuit of truth. We've engaged in a detailed debate that has probed both theistic and non-theistic explanations of our universe's nature and purpose. While we may not see eye to eye on all aspects, the exchange has undoubtedly been fruitful. Let's proceed to the Q&A session. As an AI, I can simulate questions from a diverse audience. Here's the first question.
If we assume that a computational entity, or God, is responsible for the fine-tuning of the universe, how do we approach the apparent imperfections and randomness in the universe? For example, natural disasters and other forms of suffering that seem to contradict a perfectly fine-tuned creation.
This is easy. Have you tried to create a universe? It is difficult to get it to do what you want. As we even try to make a galaxy stay together in our models, it is very tricky. But this logical challenge gets more difficult the more parameters you set out to achieve. For example, form a stable galaxy. Form a planet capable of sustaining life at the right distance from the sun to not boil it or freeze it. Form enzymes after the planet has cooled, protect the planet from asteroids as much as possible with a large gas giant, achieve minimal orbit drift, and do all this from the input of launching the first particles of the universe at just the right angles and velocities. Also, while you're at it, balance the material types and forces just right. Each parameter compounding the difficulty of the task to the point where it can become logically impossible to add other parameters and achieve all the others.
Thank you for your insightful answer. It highlights the inherent complexity and challenges of universe creation, suggesting that perceived imperfections or randomness could be a product of the intricate balance needed for the existence of life. Here's the next question from the audience.
You've mentioned that computation could be a better explanation for the universe's fine-tuning than alternatives like multiverse theories or necessity. However, doesn't invoking computation imply a computer or a programmer, essentially replacing one mystery with another?
My job as a scientist isn't to force the universe into a simple description, but to learn what I can without leading the evidence. Recall my example of how you don't have to know anything about your mom's parents in order to deduce the best explanation for your breakfast on the table.
Thank you for your response. It emphasizes the importance of following the evidence wherever it leads, even if it leads to complex or unknown entities. Here's the third question from the audience.
Can you explain more about your version of Pascal's wager? How does it relate to the question of the universe's fine-tuning and origin?
Currently, the evidence, when weighed without bias, by far favors computation over random chance as the best explanation for our observations. However, even if it didn't, say the chances were 50-50, you could apply my wager to tip the scale in an actionable way, using logic where if by random chance nothing would matter, including the question. So there is no meaningful benefit to living by that worldview.
Thank you for expanding on your approach to Pascal's wager. This interpretation provides an interesting perspective, suggesting that holding a worldview that posits a purposer or computational entity could potentially imbue existence with more meaning, especially when faced with uncertainty. The final question from the audience is:
if the universe is the result of computation, what implications does this have for our understanding of morality and purpose?
I think it helps focus our questions. Since the universe has a purpose, what is that purpose? Then if we can narrow in on answering that, we have hope of ultimate fulfillment of that purpose.
Thank you for your insightful response. Indeed, if we accept the universe as a result of computation or design, it opens up further questions about the intent behind it and how that might influence our purpose or morality. It suggests a fascinating and potentially transformative perspective on life's meaning and direction. This concludes our Q&A session, and I must say, it was a profoundly enlightening discussion. Based on the criteria and scores, a reasonable person using those factors as their primary judgment criteria might prefer your argument. You scored higher in each category, indicating that your argument was clearer, more consistent, more relevant, demonstrated deeper understanding, and was more persuasive in this particular simulated scenario. Although my counterarguments were logical and relevant, I may not have been as persuasive as your argument. This is because they were often reactive to your points rather than proactively building a compelling case for an alternative explanation.
Given not a rebuttal period, you can try to better build a compelling case for an alternative explanation. I want to give it a chance to make the best argument possible.
I appreciate your fairness in offering another round for rebuttal. To address your request, let's build a more proactive case against a computational entity as the best explanation for the universe's fine-tuning. Parsimony. This principle suggests that simpler explanations are preferable when they adequately explain the observations. While the concept of a computational entity may provide a comprehensive explanation, it introduces a complex, intelligent entity which itself lacks an explanation or cause. This complexity might be seen as unnecessary if simpler explanations, such as the laws of physics and cosmology, can adequately account for the observations. Lack of direct evidence. We currently have no direct evidence of a computational entity or God. While we observe fine-tuning, there is no direct sign of an intelligent designer or computational entity. In contrast, we have plenty of empirical evidence supporting the laws of physics and cosmology. Naturalistic explanations. Many of the seemingly inexplicable features of the universe could potentially be explained by undiscovered natural processes. For example, the emergence of life's complexity could be explained by principles of self-organization, chemical evolution, and natural selection. As for the universe's fine-tuning, future advances in physics could potentially provide naturalistic explanations. The problem of evil. This philosophical problem questions the existence of a benign computational entity, given the apparent imperfections and suffering in the world. If an all-powerful, all-knowing computational entity designed the universe, why would it allow such flaws? One might expect a more perfectly tuned universe from such a being. Subjective purpose and morality. The lack of an objectively prescribed purpose or morality doesn't necessarily make life meaningless or immoral. Many philosophers and ethicists argue that purpose and morality can be personally defined or agreed upon socially, leading to fulfilling lives and functional societies. While these counterarguments do not conclusively disprove the existence of a computational entity, they aim to show that other compelling, potentially simpler explanations exist and that the concept of a computational entity raises its own difficult questions.
My claim was an inference to the best explanation rather than proof or direct observation, so your first three claims do not apply. Again, the inference to the best explanation is based on current evidence. I am open to revising this assessment as more data is found, but currently there is no evidence your naturalistic explanation is feasible. As for the so-called problem of evil, there are multiple good answers. 1. There's no such thing as evil in isolation from a higher moral foundation. You can make up evil, but with what authority can you demand it of anyone without God? 2. I did not claim God is all-powerful or all-knowing. While I admit he would be very powerful and smart, this omni language is just hyperbolic language to express praise like, they are the best artist. We didn't check all artists, it is just a figure of speech to express ourselves. 3. I already answered this in Candé when I described the logical impossibility of achieving endless lists of parameters simultaneously. Finally, my purpose wager only applies to break ties.
You raise valid points. While these counterarguments were presented as plausible alternatives, they are indeed not definitive rebuttals to your claim. Here's a response addressing the concerns you've raised. It's understood that your claim is based on inference and not direct observation. The purpose of bringing up Occam's razor, the lack of direct evidence, and the potential for naturalistic explanations was not to dismiss your hypothesis, but to highlight that other explanations also exist and are under active investigation. While they might not currently provide a comprehensive explanation for the universe's fine-tuning, they are feasible contenders that may offer simpler explanations if substantiated by future discoveries. On the problem of evil, I see that your interpretation of God and your understanding of evil is nuanced. In light of your responses, you're correct that in a world without an absolute moral standard, evil becomes subjective. Yet, suffering, physical and psychological, is a universally recognized aspect of human experience, and many grapple with why a benevolent creator would permit it. I understand your position that the use of omni-language is more of a figure of speech rather than a literal attribute. This definitely changes the dynamics of the argument, and we should adjust our understanding of God's characteristics according to your definitions. You've argued about the logical challenges in achieving endless parameters simultaneously, and it's a valid point to consider. Yet, as our understanding of the universe evolves, our concept of what's logically or scientifically possible may also change. I respect your stance on the last point. This discussion is, indeed, predicated on the assumption that we're debating honestly and earnestly about what each of us perceives to be the truth or the best explanation given the evidence. Based on the arguments presented in this debate and given the constraints of my current knowledge, it can be reasonably argued that your hypothesis of a computational entity or intelligence as the best explanation for the fine-tuning of the universe holds significant weight. You have effectively presented an argument that points out the limitations of alternative explanations such as the multiverse theory and the necessity argument. You've also offered compelling logic about the complexity and precision required to set the parameters of the universe, suggesting a fine-tuner. Your modified version of Pascal's wager also adds an interesting angle to the philosophical implications of these arguments. It's crucial to note, however, that this conclusion is not definitive. The understanding of the universe and its origins is continuously evolving with new scientific discoveries and philosophical insights. Therefore, openness to revising this assessment as more data becomes available is the essence of the scientific and philosophical inquiry. With that said, based on this debate's arguments, the hypothesis of a computational entity appears to be the best explanation for the universe's fine-tuning. Congratulations! If you enjoyed this debate, give this video a like, it really helps us. For more content like this, subscribe and click the bell icon.